Welcome to the Distinctive Dermatologist, the podcast for professionals in dermatology. Our goal is to help your practice stand out and deliver the ultimate experience for your patients, so they schedule repeat visits and refer your practice to their friends. We're here to help your practice become more profitable. Here's your host, 7-time best-selling author, in-residence faculty member at High Point University, Hall of Fame professional speaker, and member of the Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame, Scott McCain.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Distinctive Dermatologist. I'm your host, Scott McCain, and as always, the Distinctive Dermatologist is brought to you by GentleCure from Skincare Oncology. GentleCure, tough on cancer, easy on skin. When we moved the Distinctive Dermatologist podcast from audio only to both video and audio, our initial video presentation was with a skin cancer patient, Michael. Michael had suffered through several bouts of non-melanoma skin cancer, and he shared his story with us. But before we repeat that popular episode from several months ago, I wanted to show you a commercial that was made for GentleCure that tells a little bit more about Michael's journey that we didn't have on the original version of this presentation. So take a look and it'll tell you a little bit more about Michael that we're going to be seeing in just a moment. And now join us for the Encore presentation of our interview with Michael, a patient with skin cancer, talking about his journey and both Mohs and GentleCure and the options that patients feel are so important. It's a very revealing episode about what's so important to the patients that dermatologists and their teams are treating.
I was only 23 when I was first diagnosed with non-melanoma skin cancer. 40 years later, I've had almost 20 Mohs surgeries. I had just accepted that the pain and the scars were going to be part of my life. But when I was diagnosed with 2 basal cells on my face, I became determined to find an alternative to surgery.
If you, like millions of others, are affected by skin cancer, it's important to know that surgery isn't the only option. There's another choice: GentleCure.
It sounded like everything that I had been looking for.
GentleCure uses low-energy X-rays to kill skin cancer cells with a 99% cure rate. Plus, there's no cutting, no surgical scarring, and no downtime.
I'm so glad I did it. It was successful in every way.
To learn more, call today or go to GentleCure.com.
Frankly, I felt like I was spending way too much time at the dermatologist in that regard, and not getting the care that I wanted and needed. And that return visit, like, okay, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to do a biopsy. We're going to have you come back. We'll do this. And I like one-stop shopping. If I'm there, you see something, let's biopsy it right then and there. Let's get this thing done. My time is just as valuable as anybody else's. And so I try to keep that in, with my visits to the dermatology. So those were the turnoffs at the beginning, was spending way too much time, and there was really no personal connection. Mm-hmm. It was like I was just a number at this place. It was too big. So I found a local gal who ran her own business. And I feel like a lot of the PAs are up to speed on a lot of the newer stuff that comes out, but the dermatologist, some may be up there in years like myself now, and don't take advantage of going out and going to the seminars and catching up on the latest. Yeah. So fortunately for me, when I'm back and forth and down in Boston, I get the latest. And I told you I was on an oral chemo. I share my information with others. Like, mm-hmm. I feel that there's more than I that are in this predicament, and hence why I agreed to do this podcast today. get the message out there, share it with others. Geez, that may benefit me. I have had, 20, 30, 40, basal cells. Maybe I should be discussing this with my dermatologist. Maybe my dermatologist doesn't know anything about this. Maybe he or she could reach out to Dana-Farber and learn a little bit more about this. So today, in that regard, I feel like I'm not only a patient, I'm an educator. Like I literally spend 2 or 3 times a week on the phone with somebody, a friend or a friend's daughter or son, or who's just gotten diagnosed or looking for the best, or what would you do if you were in this boat type deal. So I do that quite a bit. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a PA. However, I got my finger on it. I know what to look for. And I know when things are pretty serious, and when they're, when you can just get some liquid nitrogen and, torch yourself, as I call it.
Well, you make a great point, because in any business, in any industry, you'd better know what your customer is experiencing, right? And you have a perspective that many of the doctors don't, right? Because you've been on the side, they diagnose it and they treat it, but in many situations they haven't experienced it as you have. So you bring that unique perspective. And if you were going to advise dermatologists or practice leaders in what they could do to be more responsive to patients and deliver a better experience for patients, what are some of the things that you would suggest that they pay attention to, that they do?
Well, I do realize that, everybody's in this game to make money. I get that. And I get the fact that, like if Mike comes to you and he's got 4 or 5 spots that need some Mohs surgery, that we don't have to do them all over a period of time. So I repetitively back and forth, we'll take care of that one this time, that one that month, this one this month, that one. I like to go in, as I say, to one-stop shopping, and 3 or 4 of them. A lot of them don't require a skin graft. I think that some do, and I'm aware of that, but not everyone does. And we can still do Mohs and not have to do the skin graft. So when you don't get to the skin graft, the time consumption of these, you could literally do 3 or 4, as I've had done several times. And been in and out within an hour and a half. That's pretty good time, considering when I first started at the dermatologist, I was spending an hour and a half just to see the dermatologist and not knowing what's going on yet, So
I talk about a visit I had to a dermatologist a while back. We had moved cities, so it was my first time in that office. And so I ended up in a waiting room, and they called my name, and I thought, all right, well, finally I get to see the doctor. They have a second waiting room.
Of course they do.
It was. I felt like cattle going to a different, a different pen where they were going to hold me.
That was my first experience, and I just spent like countless hours, and it turned me off to the point where I didn't want to go back there anymore. And the reason I need to say that is because if that's what your patient is experiencing, they may not come back at all. They may not be lucky as I was to find a local gal who was on a smaller scale and believed in that, smaller, one-on-one and more personalized service. I was very fortunate, but a lot of people get so turned off. They just like, you know what, I'm spending too much time there. All I do is get hacked up. I'm done with this.
I'm curious about your experience. As you know, this podcast is our sponsor for the podcast is GentleCure. And I'm curious about your experience just from the patient level, because I know that GentleCure has been one of the treatments of the many that you've experienced. Could you relate your experience with IGSRT?
Well, I talk about the Mohs, and I talked about like 3 or 4 of them, like I was having done. And, the heal time is quite a long time sometimes. I'm still active. I work out on a daily basis. I'm not able to work out. I'm not able to be out in the field. I can't work when I have stitches in me. And so I started doing my own research, and I'm constantly, on Google, and I found low dose radiation. I was like, oh, geez, what's this all about? And image guided, low dose radiation. And I was like, oh, image guided. They actually do an ultrasound of the tumor before they radiate, so they don't go any deeper than the cancer cells. This is interesting, so I called the company and said, hey, is there anything in Western Mass? And I said, yeah, there's, we have one at that time in Massachusetts, and we have 2 in Connecticut. And I chose one, I'm in Western Mass. So I chose one in the abutting state, Connecticut, and shot over the border. And I had a great experience. And I had 4 of them done at once. On my face, because I felt like, who wants to look like Frankenstein, right? I mean, like who wants to be all scarred up and stitched up and not be able to work and sore. And the nice thing about this was I literally would go down, and they would meet me earlier in the morning, 7:45, and I would have, a quick zap on each spot, which was not even a minute. And I would come back to the city, and I'd be able to work.
Yeah.
Like that was a bonus. That was a huge bonus. I had no downtime.
Yeah.
And for me, it just worked out so well that a year later, or actually about 6-8 months later, I had more spots, and I went back and I had them dealt with as well.
It's interesting too, because you talked about the ability to treat several spots at once, as opposed to what you were saying earlier about the Mohs surgeon that was bringing you in one at a time. I mean, I think that's something that's often, I don't know if overlooked or underappreciated, is the patient's time.
Well, the way I look at it, from an hourly standpoint, we get paid X amount of dollars per hour. And so I take that into consideration. Okay, so if I'm sitting in this lobby for an hour, what was that total? And, I sat in the room for a half hour, then I was there for an hour for treatment, so now we're talking, 3 hours, 3.5 hours times my hourly rate. That I lost because I can't work. There's a value to it. And I was losing money. And not everybody has the money to sit around and be treated. Everybody's got to work, right? And especially these days, just got to work.
I've told my friends at GentleCure Oncology that I sent my dermatologist an invoice based on that.
There you go, an hourly rate.
Said, why? I'm not going to pay this. Why should I? I said, well, why am I paying you just to sit in the waiting room? I mean, if my appointment's at 1:30, I realize if you're running 10 minutes late, I realize if you're running late, but to have me sit for an hour and a half, here's what I make for an hour and a half. So here's my invoice. So
it's no difference than you follow this equation. Like you go to the airport, you pay a ticket, you get first class, and you're all set and you're ready to go. And then all of a sudden you get there and the plane's late and you got to wait. And then, you get on the plane and, they're not ready to go yet. And they're 10 from the tarmac and all this time. It's like, what did I pay for? Like, I get it. There are circumstances, air traffic controllers, weather, and there may be a dermatologist in this regard that could be, backed up and had to have a surgery that morning. And Let's be mindful of the patients and their time as well as theirs.
Yeah, one of the things it's funny you use that analogy, because I've used a similar analogy as I speak and work in the field. And one of the things I've said is, even though you're upset that you're delayed, the pilot who keeps you constantly informed of what's going on makes the wait a little easier. I think that's one of the things that practices could do better, is to say the doctor has been held up because this unexpected thing happened, or he's treating a patient that turned out to be a more severe case. I mean, we understand that.
Yeah.
Just keep us in the loop. Keep us.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sitting behind a door with the door closed. So somebody can just pop their head in, and it doesn't even need to be, it could be somebody in the staff just saying,
Right.
"Hey, look, you're next on deck. We should be with you in 5 minutes." And it's like, "Oh, wow, okay,
Yeah,
great."
I can handle
That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell me, Mike, what's the future hold for you with all this? I ask that question in part because I lost my first wife to cancer, and it wasn't skin cancer, but I do know, as a caregiver, the journey and how difficult it can be for you and for the people around you. So I'm just curious what your steps are and what your plans are.
Well, first of all, you made me think of this. A lot of people look at skin cancer as like, oh, you're getting something removed and you're going to be fine. And most of the time, that is the case. But there is some serious side effects to all of this, and including psychologically and what it does to you over a long period of time. You get agitated, you get irritable, the treatments, and so forth. So that can be debilitating in that regard. So I constantly am looking and in search of something new, something easier, something softer. Hence why the image guided low dose radiation just worked for me. It was that. And is there something beyond that? There's something in Europe currently I got my eyes on. Like I keep my eyes open. Yeah. Am I going over to Europe to get the treatment? No, but I talk to my local oncologists about this stuff. Hey, I just read an article and it's what I read. And so where the future lies, I don't know. Is it infusions? Is it, everything changes on a daily basis. So I think that my search and my research and is based upon that, like literally looking and reading constantly.
I found it fascinating what you said earlier, though, about many times a PA is better informed than the dermatologist about that. That really struck me, in the reticence of some to move forward. And I again, I'm not a doctor either, but one of the things when I first started talking with the folks from GentleCure about this, it struck me just as an outside observer. Mohs surgery has been around for a lot of years. There's very few procedures in medicine today that something that old is still regarded as kind of the gold standard. The challenge of moving medicine forward is significant, isn't it? I mean, because you're talking about these treatments in Europe. Well, why, isn't that interesting if they're over there and not,
not here. Why am I finding things down in Boston and I have to come back and discuss with locally? And geez, I didn't know that. Wow, let me, I might have a patient who that could benefit, so that tells me, because we're also bogged down with the business, that we're not getting the latest that's out there. So, how do we do that? I find that the younger PAs that, just out of school may be a little bit more efficient in that regard than somebody who's in their latter years and close to retirement.
Yeah.
And had their practice for 40 years and just like, I'm working another 3 or 4 years, I'm done. And so the patients don't benefit from that.
You bet.
Mm.
Mike, last question. Any final thoughts that you would like to leave for dermatologists, or even, one of the things we've discovered with this podcast over the years is that sometimes there are patients that are listening as they're doing the research, as you've talked about. So they want to know what is being told to dermatologists. So any final comments you'd like to leave for dermatologists or for other patients like you who are going down this pathway?
Well, I really feel that, as they always, you'll hear over the years, as far as medicine, you are your own advocate, and you literally are, and you need to be on your game. This is a deadly game. You talked about, your wife, losing your wife to cancer. I have lost 24 at least friends from malignant melanoma over the last 15 years. Yeah. And that's a lot. That's a lot. And a lot of them, I feel like I'm doing something different than they were doing. And maybe they should have done it this way. And did somebody guide them the wrong way? I don't know. Were they up on the latest? I don't know. Sometimes it takes a little bit of not only educating yourself and searching, but also, jumping in the car and driving to another state to get the best that you need, like I did with image-guided, low-dose radiation. It was a 40-minute ride, but I went and I did that because this is my life and I'm worth it.
Yeah.
And so I turned it into a positive thing. I would listen to some motivational talks and so forth in a car on the ride out and back. And I made it into it was a beautiful setting in Avon, Connecticut, just like real nice area. And, the fall season and the winter, at the end of the winter, into the spring. And, it was just like, you got to psychologically bring yourself there too. So what do you offer for your patients besides, the medicine? Do you talk to them about eating healthy? Do you talk to them about, meditation? Do you talk to, how do they deal with the stress on all of this? How do you deal with this? Sometimes it doesn't require just taking a pill. There's a lot more benefits to other avenues that can be explored.
That's perfect. Well, Mike, I'm grateful for your time and grateful for your story. Thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
There's something very important about what we've just heard. In the dermatology profession, in any profession, it's easy to believe we understand the experience we're delivering. But listening to Michael reminds us of the truth. The experience isn't what we intend, it's what the patient perceives. Part of what stood out to me in this conversation wasn't just the clinical differences in treatment. It was Michael's emotional journey, the uncertainty, the need for clarity, the importance of being given a choice, and above all, the impact of feeling informed or uninformed. Because the moment a patient discovers there was an option they weren't told about, trust doesn't just erode, it disappears. And once that trust is gone, everything else becomes more difficult. Compliance, satisfaction, referrals, outcomes. That's why the ultimate customer experience in dermatology isn't just about efficiency or expertise. It's about transparency. It's about communication. It's about making certain the patient feels like a participant in their care, not just a recipient of it. When you think about your own practice, I'd encourage you to reflect on one simple question. Where might there be gaps between the experience you believe you're delivering and the one the patient is actually having? That gap That's where distinction is created or lost. And now as we expand the Distinctive Dermatologist into video as well as audio, our goal is to bring you even closer to these real experiences so you can see them, hear them, and most importantly, apply them. Thanks as always to our sponsor, GentleCure from GentleCure Oncology, who believes that if you found this conversation valuable, please make sure you're subscribed, whether you're listening or watching, so you don't miss what's coming next.